Here's my question. Did Boston's favorite slugger bring meth to Major League Baseball? Baseball fans want their game pure, their stats pure, their heroes pure. But has the game ever been pure? This is the Purity Ring Podcast, pissing off baseball fans one episode at a time. There was a time, not so long ago, when amphetamines were super common in Major League Baseball.
Over 90% of Major Leagues was using Dexamil when I was playing. Yeah, it was all high.
No, it was about 95%.
They were passed around casually.
All it was like drinking 15 cups of coffee and going, maybe 20 cups of coffee, and going out there and pitching a ball game.
Mixed into coffee and water in the clubhouse. And eaten like Skittles by ball players all over the country. Back in 2005, being quoted in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one-time Atlanta Braves feat Chipper Jones said, "I don't want to say guys are addicted.
All right, let's do this. I got minds to twist and values to warp.
But it's like putting on your uniform." Jones told the LA Times, "You have your glove, your batting gloves, your bat, you take your greenie, and you're ready to go." Chipper was referring to greenies in baseball, clearly an almost addiction, but also one of baseball's time-honored traditions.
I used to hear that trainers would distribute them in the 60s, but then at some point they were outlawed, and so it went underground, but players still used it. I didn't get into that, but I knew other guys did. But it was tough. It's demanding. You're playing 162 games in that 180-day time period, and it's 9 innings. It's 3 hours of concentration at an extremely high pitch. All it takes is just a little bit of a lack of concentration in a major league game to make the big difference.
Will Carroll, in Baseball Prospectus back in 2006, said amphetamines and similar performance-enhancing substances have penetrated the game in ways that steroids never came close to doing. What if I took a guess and said that 75% of major leaguers used banned amphetamines during the course of a season? Would you be shocked if the number was over?
Here's my take on it. I don't believe that Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig drank all night long, rode on those trains all night long, got up and played a 1 o'clock game on Sunday or every day in the sun without some help. And I believe everybody's had help throughout this game.
In 2005, the baseball commissioner came to the realization that players are using illegal stimulants to get up for the games and vowed to rid the sport of amphetamines through testing.
We never had a drug testing program. We went through a terrible period in the 80s, John, with cocaine. And we couldn't get a drug testing program. Couldn't get a program. And by the way, we had a problem. Running the Milwaukee club, I can tell you we had a problem. And yet the union wouldn't agree to it. So, because it's a subject of collective bargaining. A lot of people have never understood that, John. They just thought I could unilaterally do it. Our minor league program went in 2001. That I put in. But no, I don't have any regrets. I'm very proud. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, says we have the toughest testing program in American sports, maybe in worldwide sport. And so I'm proud of what we've done and how we've done it. And that's with a union that really fought us very aggressively on this issue.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, where have I heard that? Oh, yeah, 20 years earlier. In what became known as the Pittsburgh drug trials, Commissioner Peter Ueberroth said much the same thing when some of the biggest names in baseball were linked to amphetamines during the prosecution of a cocaine dealer briefly employed as the Pirates clubhouse caterer.
Baseball also has chosen to attack drugs in this country and to take a negative position and turn it into a positive one, not only for our game, but for all the youngsters and fans of all ages that watch baseball every day during our season.
J. Allen Johnson, the former federal prosecutor who tried the high-profile case, said they knew it 20 years ago. If you don't ban it or test for it, it's not just going to go away. Since 1970, their use without a valid prescription has been a federal crime under the Controlled Substances Act. While steroids have garnered the bulk of attention in recent decades, amphetamines have been around much longer. Their use is more prevalent than performance-enhancing drugs, and they are considered more menacing, according to health experts.
If they took them, I never saw it. I was thoroughly against that because I used to read the literature, and I used to try to get the players to read the literature on how later on in life you'll pay for that with heart problems and lung problems.
Dr. Charles Yasalis, professor of health and human development at Penn State University, who is writing a book on stimulants, says amphetamines have far less impact on performance on the field, but they are way, way more dangerous. They can stone cold kill you on the spot.
When I was down, like if I lay down to go to sleep after being up about a week, I'd wake up with cramps, feeling low, and couldn't get out of bed. I'd have to fix in order to get up. They roll you physically. Your skin gets discolored, your teeth get rotten. I'd always be nervous if I didn't fix. Oh, a lot of people say it's just emotional or psychological. But I did get physically dependent on them.
Although amphetamines have been around for more than 100 years, their modern use stems from World War II because of their ability to delay the onset of fatigue by stimulating the central nervous system. Combat soldiers, pilots, and supply truck drivers were given them to stay awake.
Hitler wasn't the only one blitzed during the Blitzkrieg. Pervitin was a methamphetamine delivering an explosive high.
It was given to the German troops who invaded France through the narrow valleys of the Ardennes, driving their tanks through in long lines over 3 or 4 days to keep the tank drivers awake. They called it Panzerschokolade or tank chocolate. It was also known as Stuka tablets from the dive bombers. It was given to the pilots.
The war had only just begun when millions of the high-octane amphetamine pills were sent to the front lines in Poland. Fired up with Pervitin,
The Germans, Japanese, Americans, and British used them. Returning servicemen who found that the drugs gave them a jolt playing recreational games brought them home from overseas. Yasalis said, it spread like wildfire.
If you didn't take it, you're going to get released and sent home. I wasn't going back to my hood. so I took it, yeah. I mean, everybody did.
The question here is, did Boston's favorite slugger bring meth to Major League Baseball?
But all eyes are on this man, Ted Williams, gunning for a 400 season. He's hitting an even 400. I think if I were Ted, I would sit out today, but Ted never backed into anything. Second game of the doubleheader. Williams, a line drive, blue darter. It hits the horn in right field, and Ted has himself a double. Ted finishes the doubleheader 6 for 8, batting .406.
7 months after the Japanese waved the white flag, finally admitting what Hitler had cowardly concluded months before. America's pastime was back in full force. Ted Williams,
and quick snap of the wrist have furnished the power for Williams to hit enough home runs to rank him 5th among the all-time home run hitters, despite 5 years in the service.
And hundreds of other players turned servicemen had returned from the pits of hell. Home runs would be hit, strikeouts made, and post-war lives resumed. And, unbeknownst to most fans, baseball's performance-enhancing drug era would begin. There was a lot of performance enhancement at the pre-steroid era, says John Light, author of the Cultural Encyclopedia of Baseball. I would say most likely it began after the war, as in the late 40s, early 50s. Then it became a taboo subject as word leaked out in the 60s and 70s.
And there it goes. It's a Ted Williams wallop.
Ted Williams was one of more than 500 ball players to serve in the military during World War II.
Right out of flight school, they made him an instructor there in Pensacola.
Late in the war, he was finally sent to Pearl Harbor to be attached to a combat unit. And he wasn't there a week when the war ended.
He dropped the big bomb, and that ended everything. And he got out, we got out, we all went to spring training the next year and picked up to where we left off.
In 1946, months after the Japanese surrender, he was discharged and returned to Boston to pick up where he left off on the diamond. In his first season back with the Red Sox, 4 years after finishing second behind Joe DiMaggio in the MVP race, Williams won the award. Widely considered the best pure slugger ever, he went on to claim 521 career home runs, batted over 400 in his career, and batted above 400 across parts of the 1952 and 1953 seasons, most of which he missed while serving in the Korean War. Did Teddy Ballgame use PEDs? No one knows, says Light, but those with Williams' experience as fighter pilots were more likely to use amphetamines as part of their post-war routine.
The Wehrmacht found out that Pervitin reduces fear, it reduces your need to sleep, and it makes you more aggressive.
Light says, I have no doubt that servicemen brought amphetamines back to baseball. It wasn't taboo in the service. It was a way of life for when you needed an extra pick-me-up.
Drugs came into play, for example, for the army in the war as a sort of pharmacological weapon, just as they used real weapons to fight. The Wehrmacht found out that Pervitin reduces fear, it reduces your need to sleep, and it makes you more aggressive.
Amphetamines as a broad class of drug are pretty simple to explain.
Most commonly, the drug is produced illegally from pseudoephedrine, an ingredient in cold medicines. It can exist as white powder, pills, or bluish-white crystals, and can be consumed by swallowing, smoking, snorting, or injecting. Methamphetamine acts to increase the amount of a neurotransmitter called dopamine in the brain. At a low dose, methamphetamine stimulates the brain and can elevate mood and alertness. And by accelerating heart rate and breathing rate, it increases energy in fatigued individuals. It also reduces appetite and promotes weight loss. These seemingly positive effects keep users coming back for more, eventually leading to addiction and potential overdose.
Players often talk about feeling locked in when they have their dosing done properly. For most players, they know exactly what to take and when to take it depending on the situation.
You know, it was a thing where I started off with one greenie, and then I did well. I take one again, I didn't do well, I took two. I used to take them, shake them, throw them. If they fall down, I wouldn't take them. If they stood up, I did. Then if it wasn't enough standing, I'd take the ones that was laying down.
Los Angeles scientist Gordon Ailes accidentally created a compound with euphoric, pain-killing, hyperactive results when searching for an asthma remedy. He sold his findings to pharmaceutical firm SmithKline, leading to the birth of Benzedrine, aka pep pills, America's first methamphetamine. In 2005, baseball was chastised for its lack of action on amphetamines, and Dr. Gary Wadler, associate professor of clinical medicine at New York University and a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine, noted that baseball banned the stimulant ephedra after the 2003 death of Baltimore Orioles pitcher Steve Beckler, but did not ban the amphetamine. Amphetamines were banned in the Olympics in the 1960s after the deaths of two cyclists during competition, Kurt Jensen of Denmark and Tommy Simpson of Great Britain.
Simpson's life and career is hugely significant to British cycling history. He remains the only Englishman to have won the Tour of Flanders and the Tour of Lombardy. But it is his death that really resonates with the global cycling community. Tom Simpson died as a result of extreme dehydration, having taken a potent cocktail of both amphetamines and brandy.
The NFL also bans them, but only tests for their presence once a year. In baseball, the secrecy surrounding amphetamine use stems from the code of silence. What one sees or hears in a clubhouse stays in the clubhouse. In 2005, Major League Baseball banned amphetamines 14 years after steroids were outlawed. Former baseball commissioner Bud Selig said he first heard about amphetamines when he walked into the Milwaukee Braves clubhouse in 1958. Now, I got into podcasting to not have to do math, but in essence, since then, baseball has been played on speed and high testosterone for over 6 decades. Let me check my calculator. Yeah, 6 decades. It was Pete Rose who mentioned the widespread use of greenies in a 1979 Playboy interview. Milt Pappas, in a 2003 ESPN interview, stated that Rose took handfuls and that his running to first base on a walk was less hustle than greenie-induced jitters. Greenies were also mentioned prominently in Jim Bouton's Ball 4, along with nearly every other vice imaginable. During the trial of caterer Curtis Strong, Pirates Dale Berra and Dave Parker testified that they got greenies from teammates Willie Stargell and Bill Madlock, two of the leaders on the Pirates' 1979 World Series team. In addition, John Milner testified he took a stimulant called Red Juice, which he found in the locker of Willie Mays when they were with the New York Mets. The great one. Yes, Milner said. I don't know what kind of speed it was, but it kept your eyes open. Stargell, Madlock, and Mays denied using stimulants and were later exonerated by the commissioner's office. There's a statue of Mays outside San Francisco's ballpark and one of Stargell outside PNC Park. As it turned out, when Peter Ueberroth proclaimed that in 1986 baseball's drug problem is over,
but we cleaned up,
it don't seem like it. The commissioner's office proposed a testing ban, but a federal arbiter said testing had to be part of the collective bargaining agreement, and no agreement was made until 2005. Amphetamines usually take 30 minutes to kick in, and the buzz one can get can last 3 hours. One familiar story around clubhouses is that players hate rain delays because they have to guess when to take a bean or an amphetamine in order to get the desired effect. But getting up for a game also means a player must come down, and health experts warn of an addictive cycle with continued use.
I would try to out-milligram any opponent. Before a game, I'd take a maximum 15, 17 pills. Not to say that I didn't have enough stuff to pitch in the major leagues, it's just that I'm trying to get the little edge.
Pitcher David Wells preferred a six-pack of Diet Coke as his pre-pitching boost, but also wrote of amphetamines in his 2003 book, Perfect I'm Not, Boomer on Beer, Brawls, Backaches, and Baseball.
Popped up right field near the line. O'Neill appears to have room. He puts it away, and David Wells has pitched a perfect game.
That amphetamines were cheap and easy to find. He said those little buggers will open your eyes and sharpen your focus and get your blood moving on demand over and over again, right through a full 162-game season. Wells wrote, as a pitcher, I won't ever object to a sleepy-eyed middle infielder beaning up to help me win. A lot of guys will buy themselves a season-long stockpile at one time. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of pills. With that in mind, it really ain't hard to get connected, Wells wrote. Stand in the middle of your clubhouse and walk 10 feet in any direction. Chances are you'll find what you need. On the other hand, those who have spoken out against the use of stimulants include Chipper Jones of the Atlanta Braves and former San Diego Padres star Tony Gwynn. For a long time, ball players referred to those who don't bean up as playing naked. In 2018, Paul LaDuca, about his days with the Dodgers and other MLB teams, said that most guys today would probably prefer greenies over steroids if given the choice. He reminisced on days when one pot of coffee in the clubhouse would be a regular coffee and one would be loaded with greenies. All you needed was a shot of it to be good for the whole day. When one of the security guards at Dodger Stadium drank a cup of the wrong stuff, he turned red in the face and had to be taken to the hospital. Time now to take a look at our Purity Ring Baseball Hall of Fame tally. In this episode of Purity Ring, players that were mentioned that are in the Baseball Hall of Fame include Chipper Jones, Ted Williams, Bud Selig as commissioner, Joe DiMaggio, Willie Mays, Willie Stargell, and Tony Gwynn. Players mentioned in this episode of Purity Ring that are not in the Hall of Fame include David Wells, Pete Rose, Milt Pappas, Dale Berra, Bill Madlock, John Milner, and Peter Ueberroth, Commissioner of Baseball. Major League Baseball banned amphetamines in 2005, 14 years after steroids were outlawed. If performance enhancement is what baseball aims to regulate, should drug users of eras past be viewed with a similarly skeptical lens to those of the steroid era? Maybe. Or maybe we should just lift morale. And that's our job here, to lift morale, dispel and spotlight baseball's honest truths, and more than a few rumors. On our next episode of the Purity Ring Podcast. Copyright 2022, Real Guy Radio Productions.